Alrighty, welcome back. Last week of school, hooray! So today and Thursday, we're just gonna talk about some fun stuff. Today, I kind of shortened the lecture here. We're gonna be talking about something called cURL and server-side APIs. Gonna do like a brief. I'm gonna just show you a brief demo of that in case you wanna. If you ran into any APIs that require like a server-side to communicate with it. So we're going to talk about that. And then I'm going to pass out the midterms. I will go over the answers. And after that, if you have any questions about midterm or assignment 11, the TAs and I are going to stick around until the end of class. So if you want to get some A11 done, you totally can. So it's going to be, I think we're going to take it won't be a long lecture today, just so you can have some time for your assignment 11. So assignment 11, if you missed the memo, assignment 11 is not due tomorrow anymore. It is due on Friday. If you wanted to use an extension for it, then it still applies. So you still have until Sunday or Monday 17 hours, right? However, do know that the final project deadline has not moved. It's still due next Friday the 13th. So don't take too long on the front end. The front end is just half the project, right? You still got to make sure all the back end stuff is working. So yes, assignment 11 is due on Friday, but the final project is still due on the 13th. So just keep that in mind. So next week is study days, study days. So during those days, we're gonna have different office hours. Probably Monday and Tuesday are gonna be the most office hours because that's like the study days, right? And then maybe we'll try to have one like on Wednesday or Thursday or something like that. But so next week office hours are different. I'll announce them later. So this is your last assignment, right? So that's gonna kind of wrap up everything in this class. What else? Yeah, okay. Let's get started. So the attendance is 5950. Make sure you put that in. 5950 is your attendance. It's also on the whiteboard over there, although there's a lot of other numbers over here. Oh, this looks like physics. All right, while we're on the class website, let's go ahead and download our starter code today. Right, there's 3 files, but we're actually going to only work on 1 file. Let's go ahead and download this. Direct download. And this would be desktop PM class. There we go. Let's go ahead and save that. Unzip it. Let's go ahead and close that up. Let's And in lecture 22, after you download the starter file, the file that we're going to focus on is lecture.php. So go ahead and open that up. There it is. There's not much going on in there, but there it is. And then start your map. Make sure your map is open and make sure that 3:03 p.m. is there, and that's going to start the servers. Let's open cURL and API. All right, so when you open up that lecture.php file, it's going to be at blank for now because we haven't really done anything with it yet, but there it is. Yes. Oh, yes.
For the HTML, so you use Friday, whatever, and jQuery and all JavaScript is on the front end side. We need to have, I know the requirement has like one instance of it, let's say a lot of pages use it. Would that need to all be done by assignment?
Oh, Oh yeah, there was a Piazza question about that. Yeah, sorry I didn't answer. We're right now we're mostly looking for, do you have those 4 pages down?
Okay.
Yeah, so if you're still missing, if you still need to add some JavaScript later, that's okay.
So it's
Yeah.
it's not like we're gonna grade you on like how this looks, more like you have.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Just like the proposal, it's you have the 4 pages, and then we might give you some feedback if something looks terribly off or something. Yeah. Okie dokes. Let's get started. So attendance again, and while you're downloading all that, let's do some. I have some slides to share with you, and then we'll come back to the code. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about something called cURL. We also call this cURL, is another way to pronounce this. But specifically, we're going to use this thing called cURL to work with APIs, but on the server side. So if you recall from our earlier days in the semester, we use to interact with APIs, we use JavaScript, we use Ajax specifically, right? We use for the iTunes and the movie, we use Ajax. However, some APIs, some web services, some platforms are going to require you, like they're going to say you can't use Ajax to talk to us. You have to use some kind of server-side language to talk to us. And that's common in cases where a lot of sensitive information is passed. For example, maybe like authenticating some kind of login. So like maybe Facebook, for example. Facebook is a very private kind of thing. If you want to talk to the Facebook API, they're probably going to not let you just simply use Ajax. They're probably going to require you to use some kind of server-side way, whether it's PHP, Python, Node, or whatever it is. The server needs to somehow communicate with the API. So I just want to show you how to do that with PHP in case in your own final project, if you want to add, if you want to use an API that requires some kind of server-side server-side language, I just want to show you a quick way how to do this. Normally in this lecture, the longer version of this lecture, I show you an example. I go through an example with Stripe. Stripe is a payment processor. Stripe is totally dominant in the payment world, online payments. Most e-commerce website, any shopping site you use, most likely they're using Stripe behind the scenes. However, because I want to go over the midterm with you today, and I also want you to make sure your A11 is looking good, I'm going to not do Stripe, but I am going to post in the lecture notes a video of last semester where I go step by step on how to work with Stripe. So if you're curious and you want to see how you can implement Stripe in your own project, you can take a look at that. I'll have all the links in the lecture notes. Anyway, so today, what we're going to be talking about then is if we're working with APIs, that means we're working with a lot of data, right? And then when we're working with a lot of data, we got to make sure we got to convert stuff back and forth a lot. In our previous Ajax lecture, we converted things from JSON to from PHP to JSON. We also want to talk about how to do the other way. How do we convert JSON to PHP? So when you're working with all these different APIs and different servers, you need to speak their language. You need to use the correct data format that's required. So we're going to be talking about that. Secondly, we're going to use that cURL thing to send HTTP requests. We kind of saw this before. We saw this JSON encode function before in the Tuesday before Thanksgiving break. How we have in PHP, we love to use associative array, something like this, right? And then if I want to convert this associative array into a JSON string so that JavaScript can read it or any other language can read it, we use this lovely method called JSON encode. That's great. Well, how about the other way? There's another method called JSON decode. Decode goes the other way. What decode allows you to do is it allows you to convert any JSON string. So let's say some API gave you some kind of JSON string back, right? For example, the iTunes API we used a while ago, they actually give us a JSON string back, and then we got to convert those, right? So that JSON, if I want to convert JSON into PHP array, into like an associated array or some kind of PHP object, we can use another function called JSON decode. So when you're working with APIs, when you're communicating with other services, other platforms, other servers, essentially, a backend developer ends up doing a lot of conversion. A backend developer has to get really good at converting one data format to another data format. In our case, we're actually pretty fortunate to live in a time where the data format is pretty standardized. Like JSON is probably is king. Most web services, web APIs use JSON, thank goodness. But before JSON, there was a lot of other different formats, and as a backend developer, it was kind of like, it was crazy to have to like figure out how to convert all these different formats. But luckily, it's a little more standardized. Everything is JSON these days. So it's easy. So once you have JSON, if you need to convert into PHP, you gotta use this function here. So even beyond PHP, if you're using a different server-side language, say Python or Node or whatever it is, the same problem still exists. You have to somehow convert JSON into whatever Python uses, maybe Python objects, or Python now uses, like they use lists or something, or dictionaries and whatnot, right? So a role of a backend developer, no matter what language you're using, how to convert data is a very important skill to have, a skill to learn. So there's that. And let's talk about HTTP requests for a second. We haven't really talked much into it, but anytime I want to talk to a different website, whether that website is Facebook, Instagram, whatever, whenever I want to talk to a different website that's not mine, that I don't own, and I want to talk to a different website, and I want to request some kind of API, something from them, we typically make it in that HTTP request. HTTP request, when you make an HTTP request, you're essentially putting together. Think of it almost like a letter. You are drafting a letter, and this letter has a specific template. Like for example, when you go apply for jobs and stuff, you have to write a cover letter or something. You usually look up the format, like a template. You look up templates, right? And you kind of fill in templates. HTTP request kind of works in a similar way. You have this template, and then you got to fill in the right details. And after filling in those right details, you can send it over to whoever you want to send it over to. So in a typical HTTP request, there's 4 things. The first thing is method. We've used it numerous times. I'm just going to review again. We gotta say, it's usually a verb? Is it a get, post? There's actually a few other ones, put, delete as well. You gotta define a method. The second is path. The path of what resource are we trying to grab? So slash means we're trying to get the home. / about means maybe it's the about page, right? So on and so forth. Thirdly is the version. What version is this? Are you on 1.1? Is this HTTP versus HTTPS? And then lastly is these headers part right over here. So we have a bunch of headers that are optional and almost like settings, like host or language. There's a lot of different settings on there. And so once you kind of package all these things together, you can send this over to whatever web server you want to talk to. Once that web server has accepted your request and everything went smoothly, if they want to send a response back, this is the response. This is the format of the response. It's typically very similar to how the request is sent. It's a version of the protocol, status code, status message, and then also a bunch of headers. So let's take a look at these status codes. So 200 OK is your best case scenario. You always want to get like an OK when you get a response. There's other status codes out there. There's like 200 OK. Another common one you probably see is like 403 forbidden, 404 not found. 418, this is like an April Fool's joke that people made a long time ago, some developers made a long time ago. I'm a teapot. And then 500, internal server error, that's like one that's the most frustrating error because it's a little vague. We don't know what that is. But there's a lot of these status codes out there that an HTTP response returns. Now let's talk about cURL. cURL is, or cURL, it's a library, another library that's built inside within PHP and is used for server communication. There's a lot of different methods there, cURL init, setup, cURL execution, but it's pretty straightforward. We initialize it, we set some options, and then we just execute it. We execute the request, and then hopefully we get some kind of response back. That's the hope. Once we get some response back, we are going to then we can do whatever we want. We can display it, whatever we want to do. These are some options that are out there for options. And then typically, so the code typically looks like this. We initialize, we set some options, and then we execute. So that's kind of the flow. So let's try this out. Let's go ahead and open up our starter code. You have 3 minutes if you haven't done this already. Yep. The attendance code is 5950. It's also on the Blackboard. All right. So let's try this. This out a bit. If you could open lecture.php. And we did this before, but I just want to do one more review. So JSON encode, we've seen this before. This is a very typical looking PHP associative array. We have some values, we have some keys and values, like first name Michael, last name Scott, right, so on and so forth. We have his phone number, cell phone number, home phone number, so on and so forth. A very typical looking PHP associative array. With PHP associated arrays, we know that we can do stuff like this, like go grab the first name or whatever, like that, using bracket notation. Then we can grab the first name, right? We could, if I wanted to go get something, and I could also grab nested values as well. I could do something like this. Phone, cell, like this is PHP array is an array. And the phone is another array inside an array, so we can grab nested values like this as well. Okay. However, this is all great for PHP, but if I wanted to convert this into, let's say I'm going to convert the PHP associative array to JSON string. Let's say we want to give this information back to JavaScript or something. We can easily do that by doing something like this. We have maybe like something like that. Right. And then now we have a string that has converted my array into a nice JSON string. I'm just putting a bunch of HRs to help us kind of format this a little bit so it's easier to see. Right, so we've seen this before, nothing new, right? So great. But how about the other way, right? Let's go the other way. What if what if PHP is, this is a more actually common thing that we see a lot, is what if I'm given a JSON string, okay, like the API, when using PHP, I request something to the API, and the API gives us something, a string, a JSON string. But then with PHP, unfortunately, you can't just there's no JSON.parse, right, like JavaScript, there's nothing like that. You can't just be like, oh, echo, can I do JSON, can I do dot first name or something like that. That does not, it's going to throw a warning. That does not work. Right? So PHP has no way to really interact with JSON very well. So the best way to work with JSON with PHP is to convert JSON string to associative array, or something else that we can convert to is PHP objects. So PHP also has objects, kind of just like JavaScript has objects, and we've used objects before with PHP. We just haven't really used them too much, but we have used it before with MySQLi. MySQLi was an instance of the MySQLi class. We created an object based off of that, and then we were able to do some stuff with that as well. So when you, it's a lot of, sometimes it's up to preference. You want to use an associative array versus a PHP object. So anyway, we can do this. So let's go ahead and try that out. Okay, let's go ahead and create a variable called decoded array. Okay, so we're gonna the function that's called JSON decode. Okay, we're gonna decode the string. Okay, let's go ahead and dump this out. Oh, there it is. So so by default, it's going to, it's gonna do it. Okay, yeah. By default, it's going to convert my JSON into an object, but let's So, but if I pass a second parameter called true, second argument called true, it's going to show me, oh, this is an array. This is an associative array. There we go. We have information. So we have converted this JSON string into a nice array. So now that it is an array, I can do stuff like this, echo, like decoded array, like first name, for example. And then we can grab like just the first name. Maybe if I want to get like if I want to get the cell phone number, I can do something like this. Right, same thing. On the other hand, if I wanted to work with PHP objects, I could do decode. Let's go ahead and create another variable called decoded objects. And it's the same method, JSON decode, same kind of thing. But the second argument is false, meaning that that's going to denote, hey, I want to get an object back. So if I dump out my decoded object right now, okay, now it looks like an associative array. Remember, the syntax looks like an associative array, but actually it's an object. Right? So this whole thing is an object. Okay, and because it's an object, I can't simply, let's go ahead and make another HR here. Because it's an object, I can't simply just echo things out. I have to go echo and then what can I do? So with this, it's decoded object. Instead of brackets, it's arrow. We're going to use arrow notation for objects to get its properties. If I do first name, then I get the first name, Michael, and then if I wanted to get like the nested version, I would just continue the arrows. Okay. Questions? All right, cool. So now that we kind of get the idea of converting things back and forth, let's try it out. Let's try it out with our iTunes API. We're going to go back to the iTunes API we used before, but now instead of using Ajax to talk to the iTunes API, we're going to use the cURL thing, this cURL library to talk to the iTunes API. And then you'll see how knowing this is useful when you're working with iTunes API. All right, let me go ahead and make some space here. And then let me go ahead and open up the documentation. It's been a while, but it's still there. Our trusty old iTunes search API. Okay, first thing before I do anything, what I want to do, if you recall working with APIs, the first thing I want to do is find the endpoint, right? I need to find the URL, and I need to know how am I going to talk to the server. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to define a constant just to make my life a little bit easier. I'm going to go ahead and define this. I'm going to do this here, define. I'm going to do iTunes API endpoint. Okay, the second one is going to be the value. I think it's this one here. It's just easier for me to work with, and a constant makes sense for an endpoint because the endpoint's never going to change, or at least I'm not going to change it, right? If it ever changes, then Apple has to change it, right? So I'm going to define this constant here. Okay, once it's defined, now let's go ahead and start the curl. So to utilize the curl, we're going to first initiate. It's kind of similar to what we've done in with other libraries. We're going to first initialize curl. Okay, then we're going to set some curl options. Then we're going to execute curl, aka make a HTTP request. Okay, and then lastly, we're going to just close the curl, or we're going to stop it. Right? So let's do the first thing. We're going to initiate. We're going to create a new variable. I'm going to say curl init to initialize the curl. Okay, we're going to set some options now. Okay. To set options, the method here is curl set opt. Okay, and then there's three arguments. The first one is that curl thing we just initialized. The second one is the name of the option. So there's a few options there that we need to use. This is the most important one really. It's curl opt URL. So URL is what is the URL we're talking to, what's the API endpoint, like which one are we going to talk to. And so it's going to be iTunes. We defined a constant up here for it. So we're going to do iTunes API endpoint. But I need to add some parameters, add some key values, right? I need to add some information in here. I need to add, what am I going to search for? For our test sake, let's go ahead and add information here. I'm going to click, put a period, and then I'm going to look for a specific term. The search term I'm looking for is Beatles. Okay, and let's also give it a limit as well, limit 5. Okay, I know if you've kind of forgot, I know it's been a while, but there you go. There's like my parameter key and all these here, and I'm just following the iTunes documentation when it comes to these, iTunes, limit, so on and so forth. Right? Okay, there's a couple of other options that they're not required, but it's prevents some issues. So let's do a couple more here. Curl opt SSL verify peer. Okay, and then we're gonna turn that off. Okay, what this does, it sounds a little weird, but it verifies the authenticity of the peer's SSL certificate. So because we're making a request to HTTPS, we just want to verify that this connection is secure, is indeed secure. But oddly, we're going to leave it as false because we're running this on not HTTPS. There's going to be issues, so we're going to just turn it off for now, right? Yeah, because we're not using a HTTPS, we're using like a HTTP request, so we're going to get some issues. So we're going to turn that off. All right, what else? The last one I'm going to do is, so once I get a response, what I want to do is returns the data instead of printing it to the page. So by default, after I make the curl request, after I make the request, by default, it's going to try to just dump out all the information on my browser, but I don't want to do that. I want to actually get it in a variable somewhere and utilize that. So let's do this one as well. This is going to be curl opt return transfer. I did this. There you go. No spaces, and then it's going to be true. Okay, once I have these options set, we're ready to execute. We're going to go ahead and execute my curl here. We're going to make a request, and then if I get some kind of response back, I want to store it in a variable called response. Okay, and then lastly, let's go ahead and close it before I forget. All right, let's hope we got something back. Let's go and I'm gonna echo out an HR here, and then let's just go and dump out my response to make sure we have gotten something back, and then let's refresh the page. Oh. Yes, you're right. Thank you. Okay. All right. Assuming everything is correct, so if I refresh this page, what's going to happen is we're going to initialize cURL, and it's going to make a request to iTunes API to this specific endpoint. Let's go and save this and run this. And okay, we have gotten some stuff back. We have like result count, results, track name. Let it be. Awesome. That sounds like a Beatles song. Great. Yeah, that looks about right. But notice how we got this result back in a string, a JSON string, which we've seen before. So with PHP, I can't do anything with this. Like, it's totally useless because in PHP, I can't do anything with the string. I can't parse it. I can't like grab the pieces that I want. I just can't. So what we're going to do then, we're going to convert this string to PHP array. Associative array to be exact. Let's go and echo out another HR. Okay, let's go ahead and just decode this. And just to make sure I got this, let's go ahead and dump it out real quick. Okay, so I made a request, and now, okay, cool. Now you can see we had a bunch of strings, right? But now we have converted into a nice like associative array with key value pairs. Awesome. Sweet. Awesome. And now that we have converted this, now I can do, man, so many echo HRs, right? Now that I have this, like, now that this is in PHP array, I can go grab whatever value I want. So for example, maybe I want to get the result count, right? Result count. I can do response with a square bracket and do like result count. I can grab whatever information I want from here. I can do like, what is it, like, okay, results is an array, right? Results is an array. And then in that results, I want to go grab maybe the 0th element, 0 here. I want to grab the artist ID, track ID, collection name. Maybe the album name is like collection name. Something like that. I don't know. Alright, so then I can now response true. Hello? Oh, right. Okay. Echo. Alright, so okay, there you go. We have like five results, and then the collection name is Let It Be. Way down here. Okay, makes sense, right? So we can convert back and forth. So now we have a way to communicate with different APIs and different data formats, so on and so forth. Any questions about that? Cool. Alright then. So this is where I'm gonna stop here. And again, if you wanted to do more with different server-side APIs, this is a pretty simple example. But if you want to do more and we want to see how a little bit more complicated APIs work, in my lecture notes here down here, you're going to see a lecture recording from last semester, and this includes the Stripe API example. The Stripe API is a little bit more complex only because it takes users' credit card information, so that kind of stuff is very sensitive, right? So they have like a slightly more complex way to do this, but with cURL you can utilize the Stripe API as well. I'll also upload the code if you want to see it. Any questions about that? Alrighty, then it's time for midterms. I'm going to pass out your midterms. You can take a look. I'll give you a few minutes to take a look at it. Please don't take them home, same as last time. And I'll go over all the answers. If you still have questions about it, you can ask at the end. Also, you can after you look at the midterm, you can stick around to work on your assignment 11 if you'd like.